we may not always open the Bible and be reading a particular book, but there's that understanding that it's with the view of looking more like Jesus.
I like the idea of kind of having a mentor and mentoring someone. Kind of you're learning and you're growing, but you're also passing on.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Postcards from Antioch, a teaching, training, discipleship podcast from Barton Church. Today we're talking about mentoring, and I'm joined by Aoife and Nadia, who are going to answer all my questions that I have about mentoring, and hopefully all of your questions as well. So, hello, this is their first podcast, by the way. It's your first podcast?
It is our first
Yep.
podcast.
Excited?
Yeah. We're very excited.
Very excited. Not
Absolutely.
terrified at all?
A little bit of that too.
Yeah, well, nothing
Hopefully
to be
not
scared
too
of.
terrified.
No one listens to these things anyway, so don't worry about it. So first, mentoring. So I don't know, I'll ask questions and either of you can answer them. We can both take turns to answer them, whatever feels comfortable. What is mentoring? That's the first question to start with. How would you describe it?
You want to kick us off?
Okay, so I guess there's a couple of types of mentoring. So I am employed as a mentor. So I work in secondary schools, and I work with young people that come out of their classes, have been identified by the school as needing a mentor. So I always say to them, "What do you think you're doing here? Like, what in your head is mentoring?" And they go, "Oh, I don't know." And then I vaguely say, I am here to give you space to talk about the things that you want to talk about. And that can be anything from what's going on at home, what's going on at school, how you feel about yourself. I think there's some kind of set things around, maybe we'll talk as time goes on, what that looks like. So that's part of my job, that is mentoring in schools. But we're also going to talk about spiritual mentoring, and what that means is we sort of seek to live Christian lives alongside each other.
Okay. Aoife, how would you understand it?
Well, I think Nadia said it very well.
Good.
But I was also thinking that in a way it's kind of a bit like giving an example for somebody of how to live, in a sense, like not just like copy me, but it's almost like someone who's a few steps ahead, taking time to journey with somebody and to listen and chat through things and maybe give advice or say, like, help someone process something. Maybe I feel like, well, obviously Jesus is a great example of being a mentor, because he led his disciples, and he shepherded people in the sense of like, I'm walking this way, you can walk with me, kind of thing. And so I think it's like that investment in someone, and there tends to be like one person who's kind of further along in whatever journey that is, whether it's like age or their faith or a particular job, and like you might be mentoring someone who's actually older than you, but perhaps you have more experience of that area or something, and maybe being able to share a bit of wisdom or answer some questions.
So a bit like an apprenticeship or
Mm.
something. Okay. So both of you have kind of mentioned something that is involved in mentoring, the kind of talking to people, answering questions, giving people space to discuss what they want to. But mentoring is different from counselling, though, isn't it? So in what ways would you say mentoring is a different thing from counselling someone?
I think mentoring is different from counselling. I don't know official definitions, but it's I think in my mind it's to do with counselling. You might come with a specific issue that you need support with, whereas mentoring is more about kind of seeing the potential in somebody and developing somebody in a range of different areas. And that's also how it's a little bit different from coaching. It's a little bit different from just discipleship too. So it's not just kind of getting somebody to the point where they're a Christian. It's then how you then help them grow in the rest of their Christian life. So it does have a specific place that is different from all those other things, I think.
Okay. And you mentioned spiritual mentoring as well. How's that different from what you do as your job?
So within my job, in schools, I'm not allowed to talk about Jesus just freely. But I am allowed to be there as a Christian, so I can still pray for the people that I'm working with, and be kind of pointing them towards kind of gospel values. But I guess in a mentoring relationship, somebody is coming to you saying, you are a Christian, I'm a Christian. We both want to understand more about what it means to live out our faith. And you kind of, you give each other the permission to walk with one another. And so that might be that you meet together to look at a particular book of the Bible, or a particular book that is a Christian book, that you come together to discuss, with the view of being able to not only just grow in knowledge, but apply that knowledge into your kind of ongoing life. What else would you say? Spiritual mentoring.
Well, I think so. My experience I have kind of two distinct experiences of mentoring people. One being as part of the youth team, mentoring Christian youth, and then I work in sixth form as a pastoral worker. So, again, I can't talk about Jesus. I can't actually even share my faith at all. Apart from in a very personal way if I was directly asked. So I think a key difference there is the intention. So like in school, my mentoring with students would often be very much about well-being, mental health, managing studies, and home life, and just like practical day-to-day things. And with the mentoring that I've been involved in the past with youth at church, you can go deeper, and there's like an understanding there that almost that you've got permission to ask the scary questions and the deeper questions. Like if someone says they're in a relationship at school, I might really not ask too many questions about that, but in a spiritual mentoring thing, especially with youth, that I'm going to go in with the questions, and you're going to have your Bible there, and like we may not always open the Bible and be reading a particular book, but there's that understanding that it's with the view of looking more like Jesus, and kind of in a way, like I think being able to see, like Nadia mentioned, seeing potential in someone, being able to like call out someone's gifts, or like they've given you that permission in a way to sort of be like, okay, help me grow in my faith, and you can then speak into their life and encourage and challenge and support and comfort them as well. So for me, I think in terms of spiritual mentoring, there's definitely a prayerful element that I would want to have prayed before I go meet with them. I would want to be open to the Spirit as I'm speaking to them, and trying to be attentive to like, what does God want for this person in this? Like, how should I respond in a way that's going to help them? And obviously I would want to do that in school as well, but it's much more in a, like, almost I'm like thinking, how can I translate that into like non-Christian, like not saying the Bible or anything, but just make it understandable for everybody. I'm not sure if I've actually answered your question or not.
Yes, I think you have. I think you both have. I was going to ask, so I assume you've both had the experience of being mentored in some form. Could you share a bit about, maybe start with Nadia, what shape that took and how you found that?
So I remember even from when I was a teenager, I went to a Christian youth group, and we sometimes would meet as the guys and the girls. And I remember there was one lady who met with me, and actually she met with, it was kind of it was a group. So I don't know whether you'd call it mentoring or what's the other word? You'd call it a growth group or something, but it had that kind of mentoring feel to it. And we would look at the Bible together and we'd pray together. And I just felt like she cared, like she wanted to give up her time to meet me, to invest in me. And that was really, I mean, I don't remember what we used to do together, really. I don't remember the conversations, but I remember being prioritized. And then I worked for a Christian youth work organisation, my first kind of proper job. And so my boss used to take me swimming after work sometimes. And we'd go swimming and we'd just chat about all sorts of things. So that wasn't kind of a formal mentoring, but it was that kind of informal. We used to swim sideways so we could chat. I don't know what that stroke is called, so the kind of the side stroke. And we would discuss, just things to do with people management and team dynamics, and how she wanted to kind of grow in me confidence and help me to do my job well, but also from kind of a spiritual point of view. Seeing the potential and helping me to develop in those things. Those are two key ones from a while back.
What about you, Aoife?
So I think my sort of the first thing that springs to my mind is when I was in primary school, my mum was a youth worker at my church, and at this point I was kind of being bullied at school by one of the girls, and there was a girl in the youth who, she was around my house all the time and stuff because my mum used to do events and things, and so I knew her through that. And she found out that I was being bullied, and she had been bullied in school. And I think she's about 6 years older than me. And she just like had loads of like empathy for me. And she was like, right, I'm going to take you shopping. We're going to go to the cinema. And I must have been like 10, I think, 9 or 10. And I remember that her parents like dropped us off to the next town, and we went to New Look, and we had McDonald's, and we went to watch, I think we watched Enchanted, so that probably shows how long ago it was, but it was in the cinema. And she didn't ask me anything about bullying, or like, she just wanted to do something nice for me. But then from that, it kind of developed into a mentoring relationship, not officially, but because she was someone who I looked up to and I thought she was really cool. She was on fire for Jesus. She just loved God so much and always wanted to talk to people about God. And I just really admired her. And obviously she was so kind to me, and she invested that time and showed me that care. And so years later, I remember being 18 and trying to figure out, what am I doing after my A-levels, having a bit of a meltdown, and my mum was like, you should call Grace. And so I called her, and she really helped me to like figure out what I needed to do. And she said some things to me which continue to help my decisions. She's a very wise person. And also I then did the Youth for Christ gap year, and she was part of Youth for Christ at that time. So our mentoring kind of relationship carried on in like an informal way, but because she'd invested that time and care into me, I knew that I could trust her, and like I just really liked her as well. Still do. But also I think I have had a few like official mentor type things at Youth for Christ. They assigned us a mentor that every time we had like training, which was every month or something like that, we had to meet with someone, and they would ask you like the same questions every time. But I found that very helpful, actually, and I had a good relationship with my mentor there. And when I was here, did a internship at Barton and was assigned a mentor, and so we would meet for coffee every so often and just talk about everything, anything and everything, and she would speak wisdom into my life, and I could ask questions, and that carried on past my intern year because of the relationship that was built. So I would still very much view all of those people as people I would go to for advice, even though they might not officially be my mentor now. If I'm stuck or I need prayer or I need wisdom, I would very much feel I can go to them, and I respect their opinions and things. So that's my experience, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So it's probably fair to say that having experienced being mentored or encouraged, discipled, all those kind of things, you can see the benefit. You've experienced the benefits, and does that motivate you to mentor others, to do the same for others that was done for you?
Yeah.
It would only seem fair, wouldn't it? I mean, it's
that's
a bit
right.
kind of
Bit
yeah, I'll
selfish
take,
to not,
but
yeah.
and I think that kind of principle of I like the idea of how kind of having a mentor and mentoring someone. So that kind of you're learning and you're growing, but you're also passing on, if there's such a thing as passing on. So I think because we have benefited, we also would prioritize mentoring, but it does come with a cost, doesn't it? It involves time, and loving other people sacrificially, but our lives are always busy. Whenever you meet somebody, and you say, "How are you?" they say busy. But I think it is it's something worth doing. And as a church, it's even in our vision.
That's right.
It's seen as such an important thing that it is a priority that we want to be doing ourselves and encouraging other people to do as well.
Would you the way you were mentored, both mentored, has that shaped the way you mentor others? Like, do you use the same model or?
Well, perhaps, but I think each individual that you meet with is going to be different because we're all unique, and there's something wonderful in that. So I think if I was meeting someone, I would want to know why they wanted to meet me, what were they kind of hoping to get from the time together. But I think I would have some kind of structure, however loosely or strictly we kept to it. And that would be agreed. So I think it's always helpful you both understand where you're coming from and the expectations you've got of each other, so that you don't get disappointed by each other, or at the same time, maintain that kind of, you can't just back out. You have to be committed for whatever length you committed to. It might be just, a 4-week, let's meet together for a short term, or let's meet together for 6 months or a year and then review it. It doesn't have to be an ongoing thing, as Aoife has shared, but she still has the strength of those mentoring relationships. So having some kind of expectations, set timescales, agreeing what you're going to do together, how it's going to work in terms of confidentiality, I think is really important, so people feel safe to share. The fact that you're not going to go and discuss it with other people in the church. It can be a space where you can talk about whatever you want to talk about within the kind of normal safety guidelines, safeguarding if you're meeting young people, all that kind of stuff, people that are at risk of needing other kind of support. What have I missed?
Well, I don't know, nothing. But just to add, I was going to say it does depend on the setting, because so in school, the first thing I would say is I cannot promise any secrecy, because it's all that's in the safeguarding training and it's drummed into you, so it just rolls off the tongue, nothing you say I can keep a secret. Make sure you think about what you share with me. I'm happy to listen to anything, but if you're if you're in any way in danger, I have to share it with this person, you know what I mean? So you learn those things. But I think a general principle that would be helpful is just, as you said, to set boundaries or guidelines. And it may be that you say, I remember going to someone at my old church and saying, oh, can I tell you something? And before I said it, she was like, yes, but I reserve the right to tell my husband because I tell him everything. And that was helpful because then that wasn't really a mentoring thing, but I knew, like, okay, what I'm telling her, I'm telling him. That's good to know. And if you, obviously, we don't have to say, by the way, I'm going to tell your mum, I'm going to tell this person, but it's just good to know the expectations. And some mentoring relationships are going to be much more relaxed, I think. Like, both of us probably primarily are mentoring in school kind of setting at the moment, so a lot of it is quite structured, and you might have like, right, let's meet for 4 weeks, or let's meet at the same time every 2 weeks until we don't need to anymore. Or it might be just pop in whenever you feel you want to, if that, like, I have the capacity for that because I have an office at work. But in like a church setting, you won't have that kind of setting. You won't have that kind of structure. So you might want to discuss what are the expectations, and then I think that can obviously change, because if we make it too rigid, then you aren't going to have that like natural flow. But it might be that you're being mentored or you're mentoring someone for a specific purpose, like marriage prep or something. So then there's a clear understanding that most of this conversation is going to be about marriage and relationships, or most of this conversation is going to be about a specific area, or it might just be like, hey, let's just meet for coffee and chat and see where it goes.
Well, I know, Aoife, you were quite keen to list all of the mentoring relationships from the Bible. So,
Oh
do you want
gosh,
to go
no,
for that?
I was
No.
like, please don't ask me that because my mind is going to go blank.
So, well, what I will ask though is, do you see, because obviously you both have mentored in secular environments, but also spiritual mentorship. You've talked about. Do you see these kind of relationships in the Bible, and if so, have those shaped the way you understand mentoring?
Do you want to go first?
Well, I think, the Bible is littered with them, whether you call them mentoring relationships or whether you, you see the difference between perhaps an older or a younger person, whether that's, Moses and Joshua, or before that, Jethro and Moses, or, Elisha and Elijah, like kind of passing on of information and wisdom and encouragement, kind of to be kind of bold. And I think all the way through the Old Testament, I'm sure there's lots of other examples as well, Naomi and Ruth, and I don't know. And then obviously, you mentioned just at the start Jesus and his kind of relationships with his disciples, but then particularly perhaps people like Peter. And I think sometimes you see in these relationships like that things don't always go right. Like Jesus knew that Peter was going to mess up, and so therefore he spoke words of encouragement, and kind of there was that sensitivity and that real love that you can see in his words to kind of there's no condemnation. I think when you're mentoring, you kind of have to. You might not agree with everything that somebody's saying, but you sort of accept that that's where they are, and journey with them. And then Paul, I guess, in a lot of his letters, we see kind of a mentoring heart, mentoring relationship with people like Timothy. And he'll often call him son, won't he? And he doesn't want others to look down on him because of his age. I always love Timothy. I've got a soft spot for Timothy. Don't be afraid, he says all the time. And I think we can kind of feel a bit daunted sometimes by by Paul, and then his relationship with others too. Titus, he talks a lot about how you kind of love other people in different sort of levels. So Titus 2, talks about older women teaching younger women, training men. So that there is that kind of, cross age, cross maturity, just to kind of togethering. Is that a word? I don't know.
It is now.
It's a word. Kind of, as we've said, wanting to see Jesus more in the lives of others. And sometimes Paul was quite, happy to tell people off. He was quite happy to be quite bold with people like Peter when he thought he had it wrong. So I think there's kind of space for that as well, that gentle challenge within mentoring. I think the Bible's got a lot to teach us about just the kind of the why of investing and spending time with people. But they weren't all experts. They hadn't all been on mentoring courses and got qualifications. So I think quite often we can, rule ourselves out and think, well, actually, I can't do that. Maybe that's for someone else. So then what do we do?
Yeah. And I think also, just to add to that, like, we often view mentoring as like sitting and talking and having a conversation and asking questions, and then I'm going to just give you all my wisdom and you can apply it later and stuff like that. But actually, like, the examples that we see are usually like in the Bible, like, let's do this together, or come along with me, I'm doing this. And like with Ruth, like, there was instructions, like, go and do this, go into this field. It wasn't like, hey, let's talk about your feelings. It was like, you need to go and do this. And Jesus had obviously his 12, but then he had his smaller inner circle that he would almost take on like extra missions in a way, because it was like he could see something in them. He was like calling it out of them, not by just saying, hey, you're going to do this in the future, or you could be really good if you take my advice here, here, and here. But he's like, come and see this, come and do this with me. And there's a verse that I wanted to share that one of my lecturers at uni shared. It's 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. And in my version here, NIV says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. But my lecturer, his version was, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my goodness, because he was saying, like, this is how you need to be with your young people. You need to be able to say, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And that's quite daunting. That's quite like a bold thing, and often something we would kind of want to avoid, like avoid being prideful, avoid being like, oh, I've got it all together, you should definitely copy me. But actually, I believe that this is a responsibility we all have, because even if we haven't agreed with a person, like, let's meet this many times, or, I'll be your mentor, there will be people who look up to us in our faith. There will be people who are younger, and who look and see and think, I want to live like that. Or even just think, oh, well, they did it, so I can do it, whether that's a good example or a bad example. And our lives should be imitating Christ as much as we can. And I think we have to be aware that people will imitate us to an extent, like whether that's youth or students, or whether that's just new people in the church, or do you know what I mean? There will be people who naturally, like I did with the girl who said, let's go to the cinema. I wanted to be like her, and so I would copy her, and I liked the music she liked and stuff like that. And I think Jesus, like, we were created to be in a community that influences one another. So we need to just have that, be mindful of that, like you were saying about older women teaching the younger women and things like the older women will be teaching the younger women, whether they're doing it intentionally or not, and men as well. Like it just naturally follows that way. So I think we have to take that responsibility.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll start to wind things up a bit. Just a question. There's maybe some people listening who have never been mentored, and they've listening and they realise that they'd like that, or people who have plenty of experience and maybe have never shared that with others. So what advice, like if you've got someone listening who would like to be mentored, or someone who wants to start mentoring others, what advice would you give those people?
Well, I think if you're looking for a mentor, I would probably advise that you start with people that you know, rather than just Google search. So yeah, if you've got relationships already where you think it wouldn't be too weird to say, can we just go and grab a coffee? Can we just just see if this is something that we can do regularly, or let's just walk the dogs together, or begin to spend time together in a slightly more intentional way. And it takes a bit of bravery to do that. I think you do have to kind of put yourself out there, don't you? But yeah, as we've said, like if there's this kind of a culture of, look, we're looking to grow and learn from each other, then that should be easier. So I'd say do it. That's just, why would you not, on one level? Like it's prioritizing your own spiritual growth, and it's not going to be time wasted, is it? But yeah, if you're thinking, well, maybe you've got capacity and yes, the kind of space to mentor someone else, I think I'd say don't discount yourself. I think don't that kind of false humility of thinking, oh, I can't, I'm not holy enough, because none of us are. Like none of us are. Sometimes it's our imperfections and our life experience which actually can be really useful for other people. So yeah, you don't have to feel like you've got it all sorted. And actually sometimes sharing what God is doing in your life, through the kind of good things and the bad things, can really be a blessing to other people. So yeah, I know for me, when I've been honest with people, and it's kind of felt really awkward to be honest with people have said, oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And that's kind of, it's probably good for my humility as well. And just being able to grow together in a way that is going to be helpful for other people. I don't know. Other advice?
Yeah, what would you say?
Well, I was going to say honesty, which you've said. And just putting yourself out there, asking somebody. I was going to say, maybe if you're in a life group and you have someone in a life group who you often think, oh, that was really wise, or I naturally have a good relationship with them, then maybe that's a place to start. And in terms of like being the mentor, I would say think about your life, think about what God has taught you, what specific things you're passionate about. And like for me, a lot of that has come out of my mistakes, and especially with the youth, thinking about when I was a youth, mistakes that I made, and how at that time I felt super alone. I felt like, oh, no one else is like this unholy, or and so then working with youth, I was like, I want to make sure that no one else feels that way. And I would seek out people, to be honest, who I thought were similar to me, who worked in a similar way, or who had what showed like elements of similar gifts, because I can speak into that a little bit and say, I recognize this in you because that feels a bit like how it was for me. And here's what you can do, or here's what I did. Why not try it? Or you could say, here's what I did. please don't do that. Here's the danger. Let me warn you, and like, learn from me instead. But I think I've definitely found that intentionally, like being self-aware, being aware of how can God use me. It's not a question of if, it's a question of how. In which areas has he taught me things that will be valuable for this young person, or this, maybe they're not young, person, and how can I call that out of them, or just push them a little bit more, or say, like, please be careful because here are the dangers.
I think it also, it goes without saying, but I'll say it, that prayer is such a massive key, isn't it? So yeah, we see like Jesus prays for his disciples, and Paul in his letters, he starts most of his letters, I always thank the Lord for you, and I'm praying for you. And so I think, if you're looking for that, be prayerful about it. Like, we do believe we've got a God who wants good things for us and will point us in the right direction of relationships that are going to be beneficial to us, and also that kind of commitment to prayer for those that we are meeting with, and knowing that that's really powerful, but it is a kind of a commitment. If you're signing up to meet with someone, be praying for them.
And not just on the way to the coffee shop, which I have done, but like praying, like, okay, Lord, what questions shall I ask? And often the one question that pops into my head is the one that has the most fruitful conversation. Or, okay, Lord, do you have a verse you want me to share? Or do you have an area that I need to challenge? And sometimes the Holy Spirit will drop things on my heart that I wouldn't have actually expected with that person. And I have had mentoring things where I haven't prayed about it and it's been all right. It's been kind of average. And then ones where I've been much more intentional, and you can see the fruit of that. And I think it's a lot more encouraging for that person, or for you, if you're the one being mentored, to know, like, oh wow, they prayed about me, or they gave me this verse. And the times when people have prayed about me or for me in that meeting or whatever, in that conversation, have often been very, very powerful as a mentee as well, because you look up to that person and you think, oh, okay, I want to take that on board. And also, if God has inspired you, then it's probably a bit more worth remembering than just something you thought of off the top of your head.
Okay, well, thank you both very much. I think that all given lots of people lots of things to think about. So, we hope that you've been challenged or inspired or encouraged, and to know that mentoring is not just something that's in the Bible. It's something that should be happening now in our own lives. So thank you again, Nadia and Aoife, for sharing. And we hope you'll join us again for another episode of Postcards from Antioch sometime. Goodbye.